All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Tokenicer, and I'm here to bring you guys in-depth analysis, news, and insights from the digital asset space, along with covering the progressive tokenization of the world. And if you haven't already, be sure to follow the Twitter and Instagram to stay up to date, and check out the Medium and Spotify for more fundamental analysis. All this can be found at Tokenicer, and I'll leave them down below in the description. So in today's video, we're going to be breaking down a project that's really got their eyes on the supply chain industry. And what they're doing is providing them with a middleware solution that'll bring automation to that industry. And basically how it works is that it's an easily interoperable DLT solution that can be integrated into a lot of popular legacy supply chain modules that we see today, and pretty much creates a digital twin of the supply chain process that automatically verifies all the small details and procurements that happen in the supply chain. And then it proceeds to process all of it on a blockchain, so it's fully immutable and timestamped for the most transparency. But before we get into all that, I just gotta remind you guys that I'm not a financial advisor, and therefore nothing you ever hear or read from me should ever be taken as financial or investment advice. But now that we've got that out of the way, let's get right into it. So the project we're going to be breaking down today is Morpheus Network, the middleware for supply chain automation. But before we go into Morpheus Network, let's take a quick moment to discuss some of the problems that are actually in the supply chain industry today. So a big problem in supply chains today is just overall from the inflation that we're suffering the consequences from for printing way too much money at once due to the pandemic. And in return, there's a shortage for materials from the rise in prices of everything, along with the fact that the demand for e-commerce has just absolutely skyrocketed out of the roof once lockdowns kind of came in place. And in return, that meant the labor force also dropped significantly. And the demand for these supply chain services just skyrocket. So you guys can see how the problem kind of arises now. So a big help in that would actually be integrating IoT and automation for all these small steps and microprocesses that are in the supply chain. Because right now, one simple transfer of records or ownership between two entities. So say like you order a pair of shoes from Japan, and the shoe store gives the shoes to the truck driver to deliver them to the port to ship. That can lead to dozens of physical procedures and even hundreds of paper documents for things like quality checking, transferring the ownership of the shoes from the store to the truck to the airport, to sorting factories. And of course, they need a person there physically, manually checking every little step of the way. And so now you guys can kind of see how the transparency of a blockchain and DLT could solve a bunch of these issues with its immutability and real-time transparency that timestamps between every single little step that gets verified up until the shoes are in the customer's hands. Well, unfortunately, blockchain and DLT can't really solve this period of inflation that we're facing, which definitely has fucked up the supply chains a bit, but honestly, what can at this point? But the good news is that they're bringing a ton of solutions in regards to automation and trustless verification to this industry. So now that we've gone over the issues with the current supply chain industry, let's actually dive into Morpheus and see what they're up to and what exactly they can offer to this industry and the problems that we're facing. So as we've stated, Morpheus is a middleware blockchain solution that's interoperable with our current legacy IT infrastructures, with built-in custom modules for some of the biggest players in the game, like Swift, UPS, DHL, FedEx, and a bunch of other guys. So by creating a digital twin of the supply chain management process on the blockchain, they're able to track every single step and automate those little procurement updates across every station around in the world on a distributed network. And what that's going to do is save a bunch of time and money from these big supply chain management firms. And the fact that they have it easily interoperable as a middleware with all these companies' interfaces that they're so used to using after all these years. So there's no learning curve to adopt blockchain in their industry, unlike a lot of these other networks or just overall systems out there that you basically need to rebuild and start from scratch. Now, the current supply chain systems, as we know, are all siloed, meaning they don't connect with each other. They're just a bunch of single systems. little islands, if that helps you guys visualize it better. So this is why there can sometimes be miscommunications between shipments, since it's both parties that are kind of getting different information and feedback. So what Morpheus can do, since it's so easily integratable with any IT infrastructure as a middleware that ties all of these supply chain systems together, they can all now synchronize through Morpheus's middleware and interoperate and work together. So now you're solving automation on top of communications and, of course, efficiency through both of these things being combined together. But they're even looking to integrate some IoT and AI into the industry, because there's really a lot that can change with it thanks to blockchain and DLT. And some of the bigger blockchains their middleware is already integrated onto are like Ethereum and Hyperledger, with many more on the way. And by allowing both public permissionless and permission chains, they're able to provide a more secure separation of data, with the private data stored on the permission chains and the public permissionless ones having all the shared data sets and just basic information of what's going on. Now, how they're integrating IoT into this industry overall is pretty interesting. So in the supply chain industry, there's a lot of stuff that goes through there, right? You got the agriculture industry, tech, raw materials, commodities, and a lot more. Pretty much anything in a functioning economy. The essential part that lets them be able to trade imports and exports with other countries. So basically, they integrate IoT devices all through the supply chain that's easily connectable into their middleware systems. And what this allows for is tracking of the geolocation, temperature, humidity, quality control, etc. And now, why does all this matter? Aren't we just adding more to the already long and complicated process? We'll actually be making it a far more efficient process with all this IoT integration and tracking. Because each year there's companies, especially in the food industry, wasting billions of dollars in shipment recalls, either because the goods have gone bad by the time it got to them, or there was some severe damage along the way. And so they got to recall that back to the facility where it was shipped and then wait for the other batch to ship, which not only wastes both parties time and money, but now they've got to wait for however long before they actually get their usual stock and inventory back on the shelves. So now it's messing with the supply and demand of their regular clients. So that causes a bunch of problems. And well, with what IoT can do is that since they've got sensors built all through the supply chain, they can now track all these things in real time, like where exactly the package is now. Is it going to the right facility? Are the sensitive storage stuff like fresh meats or pharmaceuticals being stored in the right temperature and humidity to make sure they can be properly distributed once they've arrived? And how is the handling and care of the package? Are they making sure the sensitive packages are being carefully placed in a secure spot, or are they just kind of throwing them into the truck? Because for some of these industries that get their products through the supply chain, with some of the more sensitive ones, sometimes distributing goods that aren't in the right condition can lead to a bunch of lawsuits, or worse yet, people dying in, for example, the pharmaceutical industry, where maybe the medicine wasn't kept in the right temperature and had gone bad, but no one really realized that. So yeah, just all the small things in supply chain that we never really consider. And of course, these sensors will also make it possible for these smart contracts to be much more accurate in validating these small little procurements in real time, and further pushing the UN MLETR initiative to take paper documents out of trading. Like, for example, because there's IoT sensors all along the way, you can now track the package till it's up at your door. And well, let's say you're out and about going through your regular day. Well, not only can you get a notification saying your package has arrived and all you got to do is sign a smart contract to have it released to you, but you can also check where it's been along the way, the quality of the item from when it first left the facility to where it's now at your doorstep, and how the package was handled, etc. And well, if you're not happy with it, you just reject the contract and probably state your reasons why. If you want another batch shipped that's in better condition, there will probably be an option for that. And if not, you just reject it and get a refund that processes much faster than the correspondent banking system, since it's on a blockchain. So this process is far, far more efficient than the legacy supply chain systems that we're so used to today. Because right now, to do something like this, you got to go through customer support, then they got to connect you with an agent, and then after that, you got to send the shipment back yourself, wait till they verify that. Then once that's verified, they got to resend the package back with the whole process of where each shipment generates hundreds of paper files, as we talked about, and requires over several dozens of small little procedures. So yeah, the integration of IoT and just kind of smart contracts will give it much more automation across every little process, where the majority is done through humans, where there can easily be human error. Overall, what Morpheus offers as a middleware blockchain solution, which isn't something we see too often, usually it's just a full blockchain layer that's siloed from everything else. Well, let's break down exactly what a middleware is. So pretty much it's like an operating system that kind of gets integrated between all these siloed systems, hence the name middleware. It fits right in the middle. And this doesn't just scale to the systems of our legacy IT infrastructure, but even in blockchains. So say one end user is using VeChain. Well, they can still integrate Morpheus Network's DLT middleware to work between VeChain and all these other blockchains or systems that the guys on the other end of the supply chain might be using. So a good analogy I found of this somewhere is, imagine a big claw machine. Well, instead of stuffed animals in there, imagine different systems and networks as the prizes. Now imagine the big claw up there is Morpheus Network's middleware, and the supply chain clients are the one controlling that claw machine. They can pretty much pick any system infrastructure that they want and connect Morpheus Network in the middle to operate between them. So let's say, for example, one of the supply chains is just getting buried with extra demand and really got to speed up their procurements beyond just integrating IoT, because there's now bottlenecks in verifying all these transactions. Well, they can simply just switch it over to a faster scaling blockchain like Ripple or Stellar, or maybe if they want a more secure one, they switch over to something like Ethereum or Hypergraph. And so this customization on top of being an easily integratable software really makes it perfect for supply chains, because now they can easily customize it to what their supply chain management needs are at during any given time, all while without having to rebuild all the infrastructure of the supply chain system, since a middleware solution is more like a third-party software that ties them all together. Because if we do it the other way to where we need to basically restart the whole new supply chain management infrastructure on the blockchain layer, I'm sure you guys could imagine the amount of unnecessary time and money that would be spent rebuilding the foundation with learning blockchain technology even. So instead, let's just integrate it between what we've already got. And this idea is much more powerful and sustainable than what most people think, because now they're not actually competing with all these other supply chain projects out there like VeChain, Origin Trail, and some others. But instead, they can complement what they've got to offer through being sort of a middle ground that they can all run through together. Now, enough about what they do and how they work. Let's do a quick introduction to their team. So with Morpheus having such a strong focus to the supply chain industry, you'd imagine their team is probably built up of people from that sector to get the best insights and knowledge on what's really needed in that industry to improve as a whole. And well, that would be correct. They got guys with experience around all sectors that flow through the supply chain. So first off, as always, let's start with their CEO, Dan Weinberger. And well, Dan knows a thing or two when it comes to supply chain management. He started out as the director of operations for one of the industrial supply import-export companies around his area in Toronto for about 11 years. Then after that, he went on to join as a board committee member for the International Supply Chain Education Alliance, which is the first organization that works to certify and educate supply chain managers around the world and bringing them professionals from this industry to bring further insights as to create a brighter future for this certain sector. So this initiative started out back in 2003. And since then, they've really expanded their businesses and reached out to 72 different countries, along with some huge companies as their clients, like Samsung, UPS, the US Department of Defense, L'Oreal, Ford Motors, and even the United Nations. Now, on top of this, they also distribute this prize called the Patak Prize in multiple ways. So there's the Patak Prize for Supply Chain Excellence, where pretty much it's awarded to companies and organizations that are working to innovate the supply chain industry either through a specific vision or the use of some new innovative technology. There's also a few more Patak prizes for different achievements, like the Professional of the Year, and that's pretty much given to the most contributive player in the supply chain industry. And then a 30 under 30 prize, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's a prize given out to supply chain leaders under the age of 30 that are recognized for what they're bringing to that industry. So Morpheus won the initial one, the Supply Chain Excellence, in 2021 for their middleware DLT solution being a very forward-thinking and easily agreeable technological innovation to the industry. And they actually won this alongside their client Federated Cooperatives Limited, which is one of the biggest companies in Canada, and they do a whole bunch of things. They do manufacturing, wholesale, marketing, administrative, along with being one of the bigger gas distribution companies around here in Canada. And then aside from this, Danny actually has even got ties to the United Nations, where he's presented and had some further talks behind the scenes with the UNCFAC, which basically is the United Nations Center for Trade Facilitation and Electronic Business. And the name sort of speaks for itself. It's like another subsidiary of the UN. This one is focused mainly on creating ways to improve the trade and business industry, with their main focus being on specifically tech specifications. And they're in close works with some other big names out there that are kind of organizations in this industry that work to build innovative frameworks and standards. So like the World Trade Organization, the World Customs Organization, the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, and a bunch of those other global organizations. So having connections, and especially Morpheus Network being recognized by some of the standard setting bodies there, is definitely a huge plus from a compliance standpoint for Morpheus. Danny's also a member of INATBA, which is the International Association for Trusted Blockchain Applications. And they're an organization built up of crypto projects, fintech companies, and policymakers. And they pretty much work together to find a way to bring blockchain and DLT to mass adoption in a secure and utility-focused environment. So some of the guys in there are like R3, which is a big enterprise tech company that's really famous in this industry for their permission blockchain platform Corda. Accenture, which also has another permission blockchain for institutions and is another huge enterprise tech firm. Coinbase, the European Digital SME Alliance, Fireblocks, Swift, Sia, Quant, Ripple, Algorand, VeChain, and a bunch of others that we can see here. So Danny's the co-chair of the supply chain working group for INATBA, alongside Dennis of One Tree Solutions. And so the main initiative for this working group is, of course, to bring blockchain and DLT solutions into the supply chain industry, and for agreeable standards and strategic partnerships between ERP and OEM providers. And pretty much what that stands for is enterprise resources planning and original equipment manufacturers. Now, what's really eye-catching about this is that we see some other supply chain companies, both in legacy and crypto here. I mean, we got CargoX, which is pretty big in digitalized documents, and some subsidiaries of the EU Commission. Then there's also VeChain and XYO Network from the crypto side. And even with all that, who'd they choose as the co-chair of the supply chain working group? That's right, Dan Weinberger. And Dan's also an advisor for the AI department at George Brown College, which is actually a top 10 research college here in Canada. And he's been doing that since about 2019. So I'm sure he's learned a thing or two about AI and machine learning that he's definitely integrated into Morpheus Network. And even with all this workload, Danny's a family type of guy, and he always makes sure him and his son never miss a Toronto Blue Jays home game. Next up, let's talk about Roger Crook. This guy has a long list of experience in not just supply chains, but also in tech, coaching, and even a little bit of finance in there. So he first started out his career as Chief Operating Officer at Deutsches Port DHL, which is one of the top logistic companies in the world, and they're worth about $52 billion today. So he spent a good 13 years working there, going from Chief Operating Officer to Chief Executive Officer and looking over the global sales and global forwarding. So just by that alone, you guys could probably imagine some of the connections he's built in this industry there. He then went on and served as CEO of Capital Springboard, which is a Singapore-based top peer-to-peer invoice financing platform. And basically how it worked is accredited investors could pretty much buy outstanding invoices, which were pretty much shipments that were yet to be paid out yet, and get a yield from this interest. And then he joined as an advisor and was at times even chairman for some small and medium enterprises in the logistics tech subsector. I'm not going to go too in depth into all of them, but I'll name a couple of the larger ones. So there was Bico, Everroad, Cyberseal, Stork Express, Aurora, and Change Finance. Now, with all this advising experience, he also eventually started up his own coaching, advising, and investment company, Actavia Stars. And that saw clients from all over the world, from the US to Europe and even Asia. Just over the past year now, Roger also joined Bain & Company as their strategic advisor. And Bain & Company is a management consulting firm for Fortune 500 company CEOs. And they really focus on things like private equity investments, mergers and acquisitions, corporate financials, etc. So being a strategic advisor for Bain & Company is no easy task, and pretty good to see someone on the Morpheus team have that to add to their resume. And Roger initially joined Morpheus just as a lead advisor, but since then he's really taken a liking to what's going on there, and he's actually come onto their team as their lead for global logistics, which is a pretty fitting role for Roger. Then the other co-founder, Noam Epple, he's had a good 15 plus years of experience in web development and information security, where he worked a good 5 years at Colab as their senior web developer, and then spent a good 10 years working on his own startup, Clean Forest Solutions, that pretty much looked to develop secure and green sustainable web solutions. And just like Dan, Noam's also been working at George Brown College in the AI department. And then aside from these three that really make up the core executive team, there's a bunch of other members in their team that actually cover a really wide range of areas. There's a few guys in business development, a marketing director, a medical solutions director, a couple legal counsels, and even a mobility and IoT advisor who's actually also an advisor for Constellation Network. All right, now let's take a look into some of their partners and connections. So we talked about some of their connections to the ISCEA, that's the International Supply Chain Educational Alliance, with the Patak Prize that they won with their partner Federated Co-op, and Danny actually being a board member there too. And also about their collaborations at INATBA and how they're working to bring blockchain and DLT further into the supply chain industry. And so to add on to more of these organizations, let's talk about the Blockchain and Transport Alliance. And this is actually the largest blockchain alliance out there at almost 500 members, reaching out to over 25 countries. And they basically work together and have meetings and discussions about standards and ways to improve the transport and logistics sector through blockchain and DLT, and kind of building the right common frameworks doing so to further advance and create a more efficient supply chain and logistics management. So some of the other key members in the Blockchain and Transport Alliance are like UPS, FedEx, Cargolex, and Simba Chain. So yeah, pretty serious consortium to be in if you're going to be building in this supply chain logistics tech kind of environment. They're also working fairly closely with SAP, which focuses on business application software and facilitating data processes. And they're actually one of the global leaders in this department, based out in Germany and valued at over $120 billion. So they've joined the SAP Partners Edge program, and what this will do is provide Morpheus the resources and services to successfully build out business applicable software through integrating certain modules from SAP and getting mentorship and advice out of one of the largest data facilitation companies out there. And to really build out their middleware supply chain process and to scale out at a global scale, Morpheus Network actually also plans to launch their platform on SAP's App Center to make it super easily accessible to all these firms out there that are already using SAP-based application. So seeing a partnership with SAP is huge, since these guys are like one of the industry leaders when it comes to stuff like data processing, logistics, tech, and enterprise resource planning. Now, they're also working with Marsh. This is also another global leader in their respective industry, but these guys' main focuses are on insurance and other professional services like risk management and also logistics and healthcare. And they're really just a diversified service corporation, and they're actually like huge. They're a Fortune 500 company traded on the US markets, valued at over $90 billion. So what's this partnership with Morpheus will look like? They're going to be looking to integrate Marsh's insurance and logistics services right on their platform with a simple click. So firms can pretty much integrate and buy insurance coverage easily into whatever shipment they're shipping, in addition to other logistic microservices, all just on a single platform. And another big name partner they've got is Access Pay. So these guys were awarded an award-winning payments processing prize by none other than Swift in their Swift GPI Industry Challenge. And the GPI basically just stands for Global Payments Innovation. And these guys already work to provide payment services to some of the largest supply chain components in the UK, for example, already. So what this partnership is going to look to do is, of course, integrate this Access Pay payment system into Morpheus Network to have them work synchronously with the supply chain microprocesses, since at the moment they're still just siloed systems. And the last partner we'll be talking about before covering Tokenomics is their collaborations with Gulftainer. Now, what Gulftainer is they're a port operator based out in the UAE. They have an annual throughput of about 6.5 million TEUs, which is a very popular form of measurement in the supply chain industry, and it basically stands for 20-foot equivalent units. Of course, these 20-foot equivalent units are these kind of shipping containers they're talking about. Now, for reference, to see the scale of how much 6.5 million TEUs is, Canada does about 7 million TEUs annually. So Gulftainer, probably just one of the few port operators in the UAE, is doing almost the same amount of volume. And Gulftainer was basically looking for emerging projects that were using tech innovations to further advance the shipment industry overall, which of course is what Morpheus Network is already working to do. So Gulftainer ended up picking 4 tech startups, and these 4 were iYard, Throughput, Zynair, and Morpheus Network. And these guys each won an award within their respective specialties, with Morpheus, of course, winning the blockchain category for their broad operations and their trustless automation for supply chain procedures. Okay, but now let's talk about the tokenomics for the MNW token. So starting off with the token utility, the Morpheus network runs on the MNW token, and it's what allows for all the trustless automation to happen through their smart contracts and digital documents. Since the network pretty much takes every small step of the way and breaks it down into its own little procedure in the chain, needing verification after every advancement before the next step begins, these automated services need fees to execute, just like in any other network. And these payments are done in MNW tokens. So some of the payments made through MNW tokens on the platform are for things like notarization of documents and data, and payments to automate all those small microservices and verifying all that. And of course, you can run a node on their platform and be incentivized with rewards doing so, which the team has said to be roughly around 18% APR at the moment, and requires you to lock about 1,800 MNW for each node. Now, when it really comes to the tokenomics and design of the MNW token, it's really something we don't see too often here in this space. There's a total supply of 47.9 million MNW tokens, and the circulating supply at the moment is also 47.9 million. So that means that there's zero token inflation. All the tokens that can ever be minted are already out there. So the team still currently has around 30% of the supply from what I've heard in some of their AMAs, which is pretty reasonable. That's far better than most of what these other networks' token distributions are. And the team has said they only do sell tokens for further development of their project. Aside from this one time, they've come out and publicly stated they've sold a certain portion of tokens for some champagne, but I think we can let that slide. So to me, this makes for a very eye-catching potential investment because not only is the supply pretty scarce. I mean, this is just a little over double what Bitcoin's total supply is. Keep that in mind. And now add in the Morpheus master nodes that require MNW to be locked to run and operate to secure the network. And obviously, token holders are all incentivized to run nodes to further decentralize the network and be rewarded in MNW tokens doing so. So yeah, honestly, really exciting to see what happens once demand really begins to rise, as they're still relatively small in the space. But yeah, the tokenomics for MNW do seem very well made and very transparent in a sense. Now to wrap it up, Morpheus Network really offers a unique agnostic solution to the supply chain industry. They're not making it so these companies have to start over completely new by moving to blockchain and DLT, nor are they making it some super advanced technology where each company is going to have to hire a new team of developers and work for a few months just to integrate it. It's such a simple and understood solution, it just makes sense. They've built a middleware that can easily sit between all these siloed systems that all these firms are already used to, and then sort of just connect them all together by simply integrating Morpheus into it. To me, this really makes them not a competitor to your industry leaders in supply chain management, but more of a complement, since you're getting them all to work together in a middleware platform instead of having everyone migrate and agree on a new platform. Not only is the team super well suited for this between Dan and Roger's experiences in their years of supply chain management and all the connections they've built up, but their team pretty much covers every single department they'll need. And their partners being some of the industry leaders, along with the support and praise they've gotten from guys like SAP, Gulftainer, and even some works with the UN. And not to mention their unique and scarce tokenomics with the addition of locking up MNW tokens for nodes. But yeah, that's pretty much it for our breakdown of Morpheus Network today. I hope everyone got something good out of it, whatever it may be. And remember, if you guys liked what you saw and heard here today, hit that like and subscribe button and turn that ringer on so you don't miss a thing. And don't forget to check me out on some of my other content platforms. You guys can always keep up to date or just go through more fundamental analysis threads on my Twitter and Instagram. Or if you guys just overall want more crypto related content like this, check out the Medium for some more articles and the Spotify for some podcasts. All this can be found at Tokenicer, and I'll have a link for everything down below. And if you really want to further connect with me and see what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis to navigate through this space and these markets, and join in on a couple of my weekly shows, be sure to join Terramoon Ventures and use my discount code Tokenice for 25% off. All right, but yeah, that's pretty much all we've got for today, guys. As always, remember to stay safe and keep grinding. Until next time, everyone. Peace.